Watch Jefferson climbs the ladder. Oh my goodness! Come
on! What is up, Jabroni JJ back here from Rum Pure Sports. Talk a little MLB on this classic Saturday, July 29th. What's up, Raymond? I think that it's like very warm today in a lot of areas. So, take that for what it's worth as you handicap games. The warm weather kind of bit me in the ass yesterday a bit as I liked a few unders. And then the bullpens kind of got away from me. A lot of games looked really good through 8 innings or through 7 innings. And then, just bullpen disasters from there, which has kind of been interesting for me, especially from the bad tennis season I had. I kind of needed this sport to be at about 55, 56% for me across the year. Right now I'm sitting at about 53.5% for the year, which some would say, well, profit's profit. But when you look at it from my perspective, I have a lot of work to do to make up for my year thus far in terms of how tennis has really bit me in the ass. And yeah, it felt like last week and even the week before, bullpens were starting to trend back in my direction. We'll call that variance in a good way. But yeah, this week, woof, pens have done me no favors. But all you could do is kind of, holistically evaluate what you're doing on a day-to-day or how you're evaluating games and try to make tweaks from there. I think that the warm weather now, especially today, it looks like you're almost going to get with humidity some historic highs. And it's, first of all, if you're outside today, good luck, God bless. It is UV is high, the whole bit's high. Granted, if you want some color, probably be a good time to get some color, but man, you won't be able to survive out there long, especially if you're doing any type of physical activity outdoors, like playing baseball. So yeah, obviously it'll be warm today. And as for, folks watching, look, they did this slate. I find it interesting how they just bob and weave with Saturday slates. This slate in particular, probably nobody's mind right now is on baseball because the first game's at 3:00, the second game's at 4:00, and then the rest are all 7 or later, right? So people are going to be more in tune to baseball, maybe around 4 or 5 o'clock today, maybe even later. But as for right now, look, I'll just run through some betting slates, give you like an early look at the slate. Betting wise, won't talk DFS because now we have a nice, fun little swing for the fences show. So, hopefully you guys check that out as well because you'll get a very good DFS perspectives there. And it's nice to see a Saturday show from us, just talking purely DFS because I think we do a good job on the Sunday show with a bunch of group efforts towards that. And it's nice to see that, we now have a DFS show dedicated because Saturday's always big slates, right? So nice to get that going. Watch it from Norway, super hot too, but not. Yeah, Ray, it's kind of crazy here in terms of the heat. But, look, I'm not sitting here crying the blues over it. I mean, I'll be outside today, but it's just warm, very warm. And obviously that enhances the ball carrying. You're probably going to see a bunch of totals steamed up today, whether you like overs or not. They're likely going to be steamed in that up direction, especially for parks that are definitely outdoors. And like I said, yesterday, I bet a few unders, got bit in the ass late with bullpens, with comfortable middles there late in the games. But again, it is what it is. So I was looking forward to today. I'll just go through game by game like we always do. And again, this slate is very bottom heavy today with most of the games happening at 7:00, which is actually the first time maybe this entire season that I could remember this many late night games on a Saturday. So, enjoy it as you will, or enjoy the extra free time during the day, especially if you're somebody who grinds MLB hard day in and day out. Enjoy the extra hours that you have here. Sorry guys, good old ESPN, firing up videos while I'm recording. Love to see it. All right, so Jays Angels. Looks like this total's been steamed down a bit. I think it opened around the -135 neighborhood. Now it's down to about -125, which I'll talk on that briefly. But in regards to this pitching matchup, right? Like Alex Manoah has been terrible versus righties and terrible versus lefties. You almost start to think about a flash in the pan with how good he was last year, especially against right-handed bats. That was his big thing, right? He basically, as a right-handed bat, you were basically drawing dead against Manoah last year. This year has been quite the opposite. Whether you're right-handed or left-handed, there just a lot of hard contact off Manoah, which shows by his ERA. He has shown some bright spots this year where you kind of think, hey, maybe he's back, but then it seems to go right back to what he's been this year, which has been very bad. The advanced numbers kind of back him up as well. He's just been, hasn't been good, needless to say. Reed Detmers, it's kind of crazy, right? I feel like you've been hearing Reed Detmers' name for like 5 years. He's only been in the league 3 years. He's technically still a prospect. I think he's only 24 years old. And the thing with Detmers has usually been that he does struggle with right-handed bats, but ironically enough, this year, the sample size is still relatively small, but he's actually struggling a lot with left-handed bats. He's got about 20 innings of work versus lefties and weighted OBA of like 380. Just kind of crazy to think that of all things, Detmers, might have improved slightly against right-handed bats. I think a weighted OBA of about 290. But against left-handed bats, you're looking at 380. They're just roping off him. Now, good thing for him is the Blue Jays are mostly righties, but it's like, how much do you believe the data you're seeing? Like, in reality, those left-handed bats should median out over the rest of the season because he is typically good on lefties. He does pitch from the left side. The right-handed bats at weighted OBA at 290, it just means that he's consistently in trouble, which I guess kind of shows by his ERA, right? This park, I assume it to be pretty warm in Toronto. I would assume that roof gets closed. I don't know that for sure. But as far as the total, considering it's 9, I'd almost guarantee that roof gets closed because that park has some serious carry in it, in warm weather. But for this spot in particular, look, I've backed Manoah in these spots where I feel like you're getting a decent price, all things considered. And this is another spot where you're kind of getting a decent price. But as I go through this slate, you're going to hear me say this quite a few times. I have been bit by so many good, what I would call good situations this year, where I'm kind of buying low on pitching. And I think in this matchup, you're kind of buying low on Manoah if you want to. But man, has he burned me quite a bit this year. So, no thank you from me. Detmers, you could argue has been the better arm all year. You could certainly argue the Angels will be able to match this Blue Jays team with lineup. Bullpen, though, definitely edge would go to the Jays. But again, are the Jays worth this price? Probably not. So it makes sense why this got steamed down a bit. And Manoah, it just feels like it probably has a good start or two coming at home. Is it going to be in this spot, against a team with healthy bats? I don't know. The good news is, Trout looks like still to be out. So this Angels lineup is pretty much watered down. And yeah, they stuck in some lefties today. I just don't think it matters. Manoah's been bad against righties and lefties. And as for Detmers, the Jays basically went all righties, which I can't blame. I know that the numbers currently say that he's struggling with left-handed bats, but again, you just kind of got to go off the longer pattern. You got to platoon right bats, and the Jays certainly have plenty of beefy right-handed bats. So you would expect a lot of foot traffic in this one. Does it equate to this total going over? Possibly. A few extra balls leave the yard, but either way, I just became a quite easy stay away spot for me. Marlins Tigers. This game was tilting for me yesterday. I'll briefly talk on that, but Cueto and Boyd Briesk. Total 8.5, Miami minus 160 here behind Cueto. So yesterday I had this game under 7.5. Looked pretty good going into the 8th inning. I think the score was 4-1, 5-1 going into the 8th with the Marlins leading. So, you're getting their better bullpen arms. Gave up a few runs, gave up a few more runs. And the next thing you know, obviously that game imploded late. I will say what I didn't like about that game was a tremendous amount of hard contact. I'd argue based on how the game played out that game very well could have had like 15 or 16 runs, not what it ended up having. I think it ended up at like 11 or 12 runs, but it definitely could have had 15 or 16 runs. It felt like there was a lot of double plays. There was there was just constant foot traffic in that game yesterday. Not to say that could or should happen today, but my issue with look, Cueto is what he is, right? He's a savvy pitcher that doesn't have good stuff, but key in on savvy pitcher, right? He just finds ways to get outs, and he's been doing it for years with not so good stuff. The issue that I kind of have in this one is like, look, I get it. You could look at this and say, oh, how can I lay 160 with Cueto? But let me tell you something. Briesk has been bad. Like, I know that it's early in the year. His sample size isn't that big, but in 2022, I believe, he had a decent sample size, like over 80 innings or so, and he could not get right-handed bats out, which is interesting, right? Because he's a right-handed pitcher. The Marlins will bring, their lineup's not out yet, but they will bring a lot of right-handed bats to this game today. Again, another game where you're going to see a lot of foot traffic. I would lean under this number here at 8.5. And the reason for that is, look, the starters from yesterday to the starters to today, is it really a full run difference? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Garrett's good, but he's susceptible. And the kid the Tigers threw out yesterday has been good, but boy, did he get humbled yesterday with a ton of hard contact. I know he ended up going 5 or 6 innings, but he gave up a ton of hard contact, 4 or 5 runs. It was just an interesting game for this park because it was just hits galore, and this is arguably the best pitcher's park in baseball. Very forgiving in that aspect, but here 8.5 total. Call it a lean under. And as for the spread, as for the the spread matchup with Miami being favored. To me, it makes sense. Cueto, who started out terribly, has been just getting outs recently, and he's not going to pitch a whole lot in this game anyway, but he's been getting outs. I don't trust Briesque, especially against right-handed bats, so game becomes a pass for me. I can't. To me, 160 makes sense, and the total to me is slightly high, so I would lean under there just because of the park and how forgiving it can be. Interesting matchup between the Pirates and the Phils. Aaron Nola gets to see Quinn Priester from the Pirates. Now, Priester has not looked good thus far, but I will say that this kid does rank as a top prospect in baseball. Well, I use it in that phrase, right? But some people, is he a top 5 prospect? No, he's not. He's a top 5 prospect for the Pirates, and he's overall definitely a top 100 prospect in baseball. And he has not exactly looked that, if that makes any sense. He was good in Double-A last year. He got up to Triple-A, started getting hit up a bit. Triple-A this year looked okay for Triple-A. Strikeout numbers haven't been great. They've been good, not great. So he enters in the majors with a few starts and just gets absolutely slaughtered. Now, granted, a little unlucky as well in terms of the home run ball, right? Because the home run ball is really clouding. I mean, you're talking, he's got a 45% home run to fly ball rate, right? Like that's, not going to sustain. I mean, he's basically pitching like a home run derby pitcher. So ultimately that's not going to sustain. So if that comes down, you figure the rest of it does as well. But so just keep in mind, like when you're looking at this and thinking, I'm just gonna lay the money with Nola here. Priester's a decent prospect, and I'm not saying he's going to look good today. He might not. It's very warm. The ball can certainly carry in PNC, but slightly in Pittsburgh, first 5 plus the half run. I just don't like it enough because I'm a Nola guy, so it's hard for me to just fade Nola. I know some people have their opinions on him, good, bad, and different. But I'm definitely more on the good Nola. I've always liked Nola, and I know he hasn't had a typical Aaron Nola year, but he's been grinding. So, yeah, I don't – and as far as the total here, I've already mentioned the ball carries in this park in warm weather, and Priester's had home run woes to begin with. You figure, he gives up a home run early, and maybe he kind of mentally has more issues today. So I don't love that angle, but I do think Pittsburgh can get to Nola a bit. So I don't mind the first 5 grabbing that half run behind Priester. I do think we will start to see a better version of him. And he's been a good prospect, so we should start to see that kind of round itself out as he makes more and more starts. So that's the only spot I really would lean. No hard stance on that game whatsoever, though, because again, I still think Priester's dealing with some mental woes coming up to the majors, so we'll let that play itself out. Guardians, White Sox. So Logan Allen going for the Guardians. He's been nothing short of fantastic for them. Problem is, I have no idea who's even going for the White Sox. Maybe it's a bullpen day. Maybe you guys know who's pitching for the White Sox. I still don't see anybody listed, which makes it tough for me to give you any type of estimation there. But I will I'll just briefly talk on how good Allen's been. The problem is that you're laying 135 on the road. Now, the White Sox really hurt me this week. I lost 2 bets to them versus the Cubs in pick'em spots that I really thought it was good value. And the Cubs just imploded with runs. So difficult to say. The Cubs are playing good ball. We'll talk on them in a bit. But White Sox are doing the exact opposite of that. So I get why the price is what it is. It just feels like a heavy tax on Allen in this spot. So stay away there. As for 9.5 at this park, I really can't say because I have no idea who's going for the White Sox. So I'm not going to bullshit you guys on that end. I'll just quickly peek the chat. The game completely disappointed in runs. Yeah, well, that's for sure yesterday. Yeah. Is Ohtani hurt? Manoah is the clap of the league, 0-5 at home. Yeah, I'll tell you this. Manoah's, you're right, Smoke. Like, Manoah's just been bad. Like, it's hard. Again, you kind of know the upside he has because you saw the upside last year. Maybe he somehow flirted with PEDs and got away with it because he just looks like a total different pitcher this year in such a negative way. And as for a Schwarber home run, I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's crazy to take some home run props with these guys. But again, Priester in the minors just did not have this problem with the home run ball. So I just, to me, it looks like an anomaly. Maybe nerves. Maybe he just missed his spot a few times with the wrong bats. He's not a guy that's given up a lot of home runs in his minor league career. So, it's going to come down for sure. It's going to median out. But okay, let's talk Royals Twins, another game that was tilting for me. I think there was 6 runs in this game total going into the 8th inning. I had the under 10, 7 runs total maybe. And then the game perfectly went into extra innings. It just got blown up in the 9th or the 10th, whatever it was. It's just very tilting. So what's interesting to me is the pitching matchup today is honestly not much different than the pitching matchup yesterday, and this total has dropped down half a run. Maybe you can find it buying back up to 10 in some spots. Look, I don't go back. I don't bet an under one day and then fire an over the next day. I do think today, as crazy as it sounds, I do think today makes more sense for runs than yesterday. The problem is that yesterday's all the runs came from the bullpens. So both pitchers pitched pretty well. Brady Singer pitched pretty well. Sonny Gray pitched pretty well. And again, the bullpens were just a fucking like KBO-esque disaster from the 8th inning on. Here, I would argue the starters collectively are worse than the starters yesterday, and the total has dropped half a run. So just based on being pragmatic, I would think over makes sense. But again, if you bet the over yesterday, you got really bailed out by the bullpens. I would think these starters give up a little more runs today, but probably the bullpens don't give up nearly as many runs as they gave up yesterday. So play that for what it is. But no, I'm going to stay away from this game just because I'm very butthurt over what happened yesterday. Jordan Lyles has been terrible all year. He can't get anybody out, lefties or righties. Obviously, he sees the Twins today, who've kind of found something with their sticks post All-Star break. And Bailey Ober's been great. I mean, Bailey Ober's like the massive human. Was he 6'6" or 6'7"? And he's looked good. He's looked good on the road. He's looked good at home. He's good versus righties. Been surprisingly good against lefties. He's just been good, right? So, for me, just a stay away spot. Minnesota deserves to be about this big a fave. But again, as far as the total, I'm way too butthurt to fire on this over, especially after yesterday I bet it under. I hate doing that too as well. I think I've already told this to you guys. If I bet one side of one game and I get that wrong, and then if I was to flip to do the other side the next game, if I lose that game, I get like tilted to no end. So I don't do that anymore just for my own sanity. And it is worth noting for you guys as well when you're betting or playing DFS. Keep in mind, right, your mental health is also important in how you approach these things. And if you're putting yourself in situations where you're vulnerable to tilt more than you normally would, my recommendation is get yourself out of those scenarios, because it's just, this grinding in a gambling fashion every day is just as much mental as anything. And, if you're consistently putting yourself in spots where you're going to over tilt, don't do that. Right. So granted, you can bail yourself out as well in that way. Maybe you could think of stories where you bailed yourself out with some type of crazy parlay or whatever. But I'm telling you, long-term on the mental health, not good. So any situations relative to you specifically that you're doing that do negatively impact you in a vulnerable way or leave you vulnerable to be impacted in a negative way, stop doing that. And for me personally, that's betting one side of a game, getting it wrong, and then flipping to the other side of the game and then getting that wrong. That tilts me to no end. So enough about that, though. Let's talk Mets Nationals. Cookie Carrasco, minus 170 against Patrick Corbin. It's crazy as it sounds. Patrick Corbin's pitching better this year than he was last. And he's not pitching good this year, so it goes to show you how bad he was last year. Total here, 9.5 for this park is kind of big, but this number can definitely get there, especially it's going to be super warm tonight for an evening game. Cookie Carrasco, look, I've said this about him. I do like playing him when he's home. He's just always, for whatever reason, a much better pitcher at home. And he draws a Nationals team that's got some sticks. And by the way, CJ Abrams, I think, right? CJ Abrams at the top of that lineup. He's been phenomenal, right? He's finally coming into the best form of himself. And in this Nats lineup, it's got a lot of young bats, especially at the top, that have looked decent. But Cookie's in a good spot to pitch well tonight. The Mets still are continuing to reel, and it's crazy because I've always been a Buck Showalter guy. You look at the organizations or the teams that he's kind of developed and brought up, and back in the day, Texas, he brought up all those young studs. And then Baltimore, he did kind of the same thing with all the young studs. And he made teams that just lacked talent all of a sudden magically find it. This Mets team was the best team he's ever inherited as a coach or as a manager. And boy, has this team been struggling. Way below expectations so far. Maybe that corrects itself over the course of the season or the rest of the season, but tough to tell. Either way, this price, believe it or not, makes total sense to me. Patrick Corbin is going to see a ton of fat righties today, or thick righties today in a good way. And there's going to be a lot of hard contact, probably on both sides, which is why the total is what it is. I do trust Cookie a lot more than I do trust Cookie a lot more than Corbin. I do trust the Mets bullpen more than I trust the Nationals bullpen. And I do trust the Mets lineup more than the Nationals lineup. The Mets are also home. All these collectively do make sense for why this line sits at 170. So pass. And the total at 9.5 also makes sense. So pass. We'll move on. Giants, Red Sox. I did bet this game. So I bet this game over the number at 8.5. And I get it. This is going to be one of the few games on the slate where it's not particularly warm. James Paxton, aka Big Maple, goes up against was it RT Walker, right? Or Ryan? I'm thinking of RT Walker. RT Walker, LOL, the pitcher from fucking like 100 years ago. So Ryan Walker, interestingly enough, this is I guess a bullpen day for the Giants. He's not going to pitch more than 3 innings. Here's my thing with Walker. Like I don't think he's very good. I think that you look at what he's done so far. He's been okay, sure, but the Red Sox have been hitting. The Red Sox have been really streaking and playing really well. The Red Sox also went through some serious pen arms yesterday, so take that for what it's worth. And I do think that makes even more sense for there to be runs here. I got this 8.5 minus 105 at DK. So I'll talk briefly on Ryan Walker, who was getting like mauled in double and triple A and has looked okay at the majors. I'm just not going to take that data for what it's worth. And I'd rather have the longer sample. And he's going to see a tough Red Sox lineup today, a team that's really seeing the ball well. Granted, there hasn't been a ton of runs in this series thus far, but again, the Sox don't exactly have a great pen to begin with, and they've been taxing it the last few days. So I really like the opportunity here. And here's the thing with Paxton: like, it's not like he eats innings. Like he's okay at eating innings. Like, you can typically expect him to go 5 or 6 for you, but to ask him to go more than that is kind of crazy. And again, who he's going to hand this ball off to is not going to be great on his end. Giants have proven they can hit lefties. They're much worse this year than they were last year versus lefties. But remember, last year for a good portion of the season, they were historically good versus left-handed pitching. So even though they regressed a bit, they're still good versus left-handed pitching. This spot just makes a lot of sense for runs. I know this number for this park is sort of big, but definitely could get there. I think it's a great opportunity for both sticks, for sticks on both sides, especially early on. And the good thing with the Red Sox is they're going to platoon bats as the Giants make this more of a bullpen day. So I'm fine with that. And overall, just makes a lot of sense for foot traffic. If a few balls leave the yard, I think this is even more of a real positive bet for us here. So that's where I fired 8.5 minus 105. I got that DK in New Jersey. Now, granted, I think you can also get minus 106 FanDuel. They're very similarly priced, but I really like that spot. So I fired there. Wow, there's another play that can't win at home. Yeah, smoke. I'll tell you what, that heat in KC was what really banged me yesterday with the Pens. And you're right. Nats have been good. They've been pesky at the plate, found a ton of balls off. Though it seems like a bunch of them choke up on the bats with 2 strikes. And just a bunch of poke hitters, right? So they've been impressive in that regard. Granted, the record doesn't show up, but remember, this team was expected to be like historically bad this year. They have been far from historically bad. So, all right. So yeah, I did bet that game. So we'll move over to Cubs Cards. This is a game I wanted to bet, but I just couldn't. I wanted to back the Cardinals here really bad. This is a spot where it makes a lot of sense to bet the Cardinals. However, the Cubs are streaking. I don't like to step in front of teams that are streaking. Cubs are playing really well. This game will be dangerously warm in St. Louis. With humidity, it'll feel over 100, which for an evening game is kind of crazy. And we know this ball carries in this park, in this weather. Jamison Taillon is no stranger to home runs. And Adam Wainwright, while he has always been a ground ball pitcher per se, another one no stranger to giving up hard contact and home runs. His ERA shows that as well. Again, to me, this is a spot where you line up and you want to bet the Cubs. Taillon hasn't been great by any means, but neither has Wainwright. This number, I would argue, is kind of high for this park, like very high for this park. But also worth noting, this park normally does not see weather this warm. This is a very warm day in that park. So it makes the total kind of, in one breath, it's like, well, that total's too high to play for me at this park. But in another breath, it's like, wow, kind of like historically warm for this park for an evening game. So stay away from me there. And I just can't step in front of a team playing really well. I think the spot makes sense to back the Cardinals overall. But knowing how hot the Cubs have been, it just, again, it's a pass for me. Orioles, Yankees, this was my final bet I've made for today. I only bet 2 games today. Whenever I have a bad day coming off where I lose 2 or 3 games in a row, I don't like to fire heavy. Just kind of trying, again, keep that mentality going in a positive way, or as much positive as it can be. I think this spot really makes sense for runs. It's my favorite bet of the day. Over 9.5 for this park. Look, Clark Schmidt and Tyler Wells have been good. They have not been great. The Yankees get Judge back yesterday. This lineup looks full again. And sure, I'll be honest, pound for pound, the Yankees have had a pretty impressive season. And I'm not a Yankee fan. I know that Joey Work, says that I'm a closeted Yankee fan. I'm really not. I mean, obviously, it's nice to see when they win because I live here in New York, or Jersey, but close enough to New York. But the fact that they're 54-49 has been phenomenal. They've been dealing with injuries top to bottom in this lineup. So there are times where you look at their lineup like 4 through 9, and you're like, who the hell are these guys? Or if you're not saying who the hell are they, you're saying why the hell are they on the Yankees? So kudos to them. But obviously the big surprise of that division has been the Baltimore Orioles. They've been incredible. I think people were expecting the Orioles to be this about 2 years from now with all that young talent. Boy, have they shined out. Here, Clark Schmidt cannot get left-handed bats out. The Orioles should be able to field 5 or 6, or what, at minimum 5 left-handed bats today, including the switch hitter Santander. So I think he's really going to struggle in this heat today. As for Tyler Wells, he's been good. He's been better at home, I believe, but he's going to see this full throttle Yankee lineup today. This game was won in the 9th inning yesterday, I believe. So both teams did throw their bigger pen arms out yesterday. Not everybody though, but they did throw a few of them out there. This spot just makes sense for a ton of hard contact up and down these lineups. And I do expect a few balls more than normal to leave the yard today. This park we know for a fact can carry in warm weather. And you got two guys that are not unsusceptible to a home run ball. The Pens, with seeing some work yesterday, I think also leans towards there being more runs later in the game as well. These two pitchers are also not pitchers that eat innings. Clark Schmidt's been okay, but he is not somebody that consistently goes past 5-6 innings, similarly to Tyler Wells. So overall, I love this spot for runs. I think that 9.5 numbers is still a half run, at least too soft for this spot. So really, really love this. I like this more than the Red Sox bet, but I do believe those are my two favorite bets for the day, the only two I fired on. But really think that makes a lot of sense for runs. So those are where I stood on those two games in particular. And feel free to stack these games in DFS because I expect the Red Sox game to see a little bit of stacking. But you look at some of these totals down the board, people aren't going to want to stack Red Sox Giants today. People aren't really going to want to stack Yankees Orioles today. It will make you different. So kind of some leverage stacks. Let's move on to the next game. Astros Rays, another painful game. Tied going into the 9th, still lost it. I had the dog. The Astros pen is better than the Rays. This game goes late into the game. I'm feeling good about the Astros and still lost. It's interesting with the 3 bets I made yesterday. If I just bet first 5s, I go 1-1-1. Instead of bet full games, I go 0-3. But such is life, right? So Taj Bradley, I will give Joey Works some credit. I know he's always critical of the Rays, but he does not like Taj Bradley. I was sort of a Taj Bradley guy. I really liked what I saw out of him early this year. But boy, has he been in regression season lately. And even like in terms of regression season, Hunter Brown too, these are just two pitchers that started out the season really well and have been really kind of on slides lately or as of late. Now, sure, Hunter Brown threw okay, I guess, in his last start, but for the most part, he has been struggling mightily. Basically an ERA, I think, of 9 in his last 18 to 20 innings. Has not been good. Total 8.5. It seems low for how these two pitchers have been going, but I don't know. I always frustrates me when I feel like I got a game right where I was on a good side and it's still lost. So yeah, you're not going to see me go back to this game in any capacity. Does Houston deserve to be a -130 favorite here? Probably not. So take that for what it's worth. I don't. I was a Taj Bradley guy, so I guess in that sense I have to lean the Rays, especially as a dog. Hunter Brown, I've already said my piece on him. So yeah, slight value Rays for me, but other than that, just a total pass. Braves Brewers, boy, did I want to bet this game over. I hate the fact that there was 17 runs scored yesterday. I can't stand Bryce Elder. I think he's a terrible pitcher. And Julio Teheran is just a guy that steps in dog shit every day and just wakes up with bird shit on his windshield every day. I don't know. I'm not chasing regression with Teheran. I've already lost 2 games related to him where I needed runs from the other side and didn't get there. Bryce Elder is another guy that I feel really steps in shit. So you basically got 2 arms here that consistently step in shit. And I'm not looking to, hope that both of their regressions come at the same time here. I will say I would have expected this total to be higher. Maybe it's getting some steam down because these 2 arms have just found ways to get outs all year, not all year long because Teheran hasn't been pitching all year long, but as far as they've been throwing, I'll tell you what, Atlanta being -205 here feels like a lot. And I think Teheran just pitched against this Braves team, I think. And he pitched pretty well, which was annoying because I'm pretty sure I bet that game where I needed the Braves to score runs. But either way, I'm not going back to this well. We'll call this my favorite bet that I'm not going to make. the over in this game makes total sense at 10. But again, if you're like me and you've been expecting regression from both these arms, you've been losing money, and I'm not going to continue that trend on myself. So becomes an easy pass for me. I do think Atlanta's a little too thick of a favorite, though. Diamondbacks, Mariners. Interesting here. The Mariners continue to be these small road favorites against the D-backs. Brian Woo's been okay. Far from great. Okay. But again, consider him still a prospect. And credit to him, though, as he's finding ways to get outs, especially in dangerous situations or in sticky situations. Brandon Pfaadt, I'm not going to act like I know much about him in any capacity. Obviously, a younger prospect for them. But I will say about him is it just consistently gives up runs and hard contact every time he's on the hill. 9.5 for this park, though, feels pretty big because in a day like today where the weather's going to be ridiculously warm, you do expect that roof to close. When that roof is closed, you're really relying on the humidor to get you there as far as the total goes. Because this, believe it or not, this park is actually pretty forgiving when that roof is closed. So total feels pretty high, I'll be honest. I get why it's this number, but with that roof closed, this is a big number. So I will stay away overall. And Seattle's a team. I'm a closeted Mariner fan, but they are a team that I do rarely get right when I bet them. So stay away from me overall here. Lean under that number at 9.5, but don't love it by any means. So we'll just move on. Paul Blackburn going up against Chris Flexen, the new Colorado Rocky. I actually liked him on Seattle. I'm not sure. I thought he wasn't pitching great this year, or especially late last year. But I don't know. Felt like a weird give up from them. Blackburn's been okay. And believe it or not, when you say a pitcher's been okay for the Athletics, that actually means they've probably been pretty good, because pretty good for their standards, because every pitcher in the Athletics sucks. I don't know. A total of 12. Warm weather in Colorado makes sense. You're going to get limited bats from both these squads, though. But the pitching is blah. I don't know. Are you really looking to line up to bet an over 12 at this park with these two lineups? I do think it makes sense that the pitchers are bad. The weather's perfectly warm for this ball to carry in this park. So for me, arrows going both directions. As far as the Rockies being a pick'em today, isn't that kind of funny? Like, I don't know. Yeah, you have a team in the Athletics that's historically bad. You got the Rockies as a pick'em at home. Yeah, I don't know. Like one would make the assumption it's easy to bet the Rockies in this spot, but the Rockies have actually been surprisingly bad this year. And Flexen's hasn't been good at all either. So easy stay away spot from me. I'm not sure why you'd want to be lining up to bet on two tomato cans at this stage of the season. Padres, Rangers. Padres minus 180. Rangers have been skidding a bit. Part of that, I think, is Seager's been out a bit. Martin Perez started the year once again pretty well. It's been regressing a bit. Darvish. The thing with Darvish is, when you get him at home, you get the best version of him. On the road, he's typically tough to watch. A lot more walks, a lot more loose contact. I mean, a lot more wild pitching, if you will, between balls and strikes, and a lot more hard contact. The thing here is you line up a struggling lefty against this Padres lineup, and it usually doesn't spell good news for the pitcher. Total of 9 for this park, though, is massive. You are just not going to see a whole lot of numbers in this park, 9.5. So I want to be more clear. It's going to be warm tonight. It's not going to be super warm tonight. So I think for me, makes it tough to love the total in any way. And I do think the Padres are priced right here. So it's a stay away from me on the Padres end. I could be convinced into either side, to be honest. The Rangers have been struggling, but the Padres deserve to be this big a favorite, especially when they got Darvish at home. So becomes a relatively easy stay away spot for me. Last but not least, Dodgers are minus 205, total of 10, with Luke Weaver going on one side and Emmett Sheehan for the other. Sheehan, prospect they brought up, started out decent against the Giants, I think. I think his first start was, 5 or 6 innings of shutout ball versus them. And then went on to just give up runs in every start from then on out. Parlaying his worst start against the Rangers, where he gave up like 8 earned in 3 or 4 innings, something like that. I will tell you this. We talk on big numbers for parks. This is a gigantic number for this park, a 10.5 total, which is what I'm seeing right now. It just goes to show you, like, how much do you want to overreact to warm weather? this is a big number. I don't care I don't care if I'm pitching against Joey Work at this park. It's just 10.5. You just don't see this number often here. And again, it'll be 80 degrees, not going to be 100. So call it a strong lean on this under. I don't want to look. These two arms could give up a ton of home runs, could give up a ton of hard contact. The lineups up and down are very potent. So yeah, if you bet this under, don't watch the game, and it's the only one going to be the last game on. So I guess that's hard, right? But yeah, tough game for me to line up to want to bet. The under I think makes total sense, but just hard to get there, right? So for me, tough. Sheehan's not pitching confidently at all. I'm sure this was not what the Dodgers envisioned when they brought him up. Certainly not at this level. Luke Weaver just continues to be, dare I say, bad. So I get it. I get why the total's this high. It's just that, man, you are not going to see many 10.5s at this park for the rest of the year. So it makes it tough for me to fire there. So I will stay away. And it goes back to what I was saying, right? Like in DFS, and I'll just briefly talk on this. People are going to look at this 7 o'clock slate with all these games, and they're going to want to fire on these games with the totals at 9.5, 10 consistently. Colorado, the whole bit, right? Good leverage stacks to be different. Giants, Red Sox, Yanks, Orioles. I think those are great stacks to be different and leverage yourself from the field tonight. But with that said, I gave you guys the two bets I fired on. I bet over 8.5 Giants, Sox. I bet over 9.5 Yanks, Orioles, both minus 105. I really like those two bets today. But with how my week's been going, take that with a grain of salt. But hopefully we bounce back today. Tomorrow, we obviously have more baseball with me, Joey Work, Holden, and Gary. It's arguably my favorite show of the week next to the golf one. And then we have the NASCAR show with me and Coop. And then, it'll be the regular week again. So, look, good luck to everybody in gambling, however you're doing it in any capacity. If you are outside today, do stay safe, stay hydrated. It is kind of crazy warm out there in most spots. But yes, gamble responsibly, folks. Stay safe. As always, run pure. I'll catch you guys tomorrow.